Hey everybody, and welcome to another instalment of Board Games Hitting My Table. In this instalment I'll be talking through all the games that I've been playing during the first half of January 2023, and there are not too many games in this episode because I've not had too much gaming time, unfortunately. But before I get started on the games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer when it comes to purchasing board games here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get cracking with the games. I'm going to start with a 3-player game of Dice Miner. So Dice Miner had a small amount of buzz maybe a couple of years ago now. This is definitely a lightweight, family style game that takes around 20 minutes to play, and it's a dice drafting, and I suppose you can call it set collection game, as you're drafting these dice from these pinnacles on this kind of 3D mountain structure here. And you can take the ones right at the top, and they're going to score in different ways. Like, for example, all the standard dice here are going to score in runs. So you want to set a 1, then you want a 2, then you want a 3, and all those points are going to add up. But you need to always start from the 1. You've got the yellow dice here, which are going to score you points based on these little gems on them. But if you have the most, you'll score double the amount. And you even have these negative ones, which will score you negative points, unless you have a matching symbol to counteract that into positive points, or to turn them into positive points. Now, I must admit, I did originally like this game quite a bit, or at least I spoke relatively highly of it. But as time's gone on, I think maybe the randomness and the swingy nature of it has, made my enjoyment of it diminish slightly, or maybe more than slightly. I think it's nothing I'd really overtly request to play anymore, because it is so random, and when you're trying to build towards sets and things and you are so much at the mercy of luck, then that can become a bit frustrating, even if the game is ultra light. I also think that some of the powers you get given at the start of the game there's a big discrepancy on how good they are. Like, for example, I had one which would automatically start me with these negative points, which is obviously great if I can convert them into positive points, but I had no option to do that, so therefore I was always hamstrung on what I could do. Now, I am nitpicking here because I don't want to misjudge this in being some complex Euro game, because it's not that, and it's not trying to be that. But I think sometimes you can play a luck dependent game in 20 minutes that's a bit more palatable when it comes to the swinginess of the luck. So it's a fine game. I certainly think it's got some cool ideas in terms of that drafting mechanism. But yeah, ultimately the game is just a little bit lackluster, even though inoffensive, because it is so quick. But that is Dice Miner. I also played a 3-player game of Gara. So Gara is a game that I've talked about quite highly, probably over the last year or so. A game that has definitely flown under the radar. So this is kind of an abstract game, really, which is a bit of a different thing for me to talk about, because I don't play a lot of abstracts. But this one works in such a cool way. It's such a clean game, as you are placing these tiles in these different bowls here. And when you place these tiles, you are trying to create rows and columns of your colour. But as you do that, the tiles you're placing also affect the other players. So if the blue players, or by placing a yellow tile as a yellow player, I might be helping the blue player, which I want to try to avoid doing. And once you place these tiles, you can place a meeple in the matching row or column, which will score points based on a sliding scale. So the more of your symbol you have in a row or column, then you're going to score more points. But of course, the earlier you do that, you're going to secure the place, because nobody can share the spot with you, but you are giving your plans away to the other players, so they can start trying to sabotage you. And you also score negative points unless you meet a minimum threshold. So it does have a good amount of tension here, and you also have one opportunity to spend your big meeple here, which will score basically double the points. So you want to be making sure you're using that to the maximum benefit here. I've never had a bad game of this one. I think it's a fantastic game. Unfortunately, it doesn't play well at 2 players, and 3 players isn't as good as 4 players, even though I did play at 3 players this time, because you always have to use all the tiles of all the players here to make it a balanced game. So what that means is, in a 3-player game, the first player always places an additional tile of the player who's not being used, which can be good or bad at times, because sometimes they might have your symbols on them, which you can use to help yourself. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. So it's a very minimal amount of housekeeping, but it just takes the edge off the game in terms of being as good as a 4-player game. But this is such a good game. I love this one. Definitely one I recommend you check out if you like your clean abstract games that have a timeless appeal to them. I actually had a really good game of this one. I think we all scored relatively well in terms of not scoring many negative points, but it just came down to who was utilising their big meeple best. But yeah, really cool game, and I highly recommend it if you don't know much about it. So that is Gara. Speaking of more puzzly style games, we played another 3-player game of Savannah Park. So when this one came out originally, I managed to get it to the table quite often, and I got pretty good at it, to be honest. And it's been a little bit of a break since I played it last, and boy oh boy did that show, because I had an absolute terrible display in terms of the points I got on this one. A really, really poor game. Really enjoyed it, but yeah, my performance was terrible in terms of the points I got. So this is another game that feels, timeless in its approach, because all you're doing on your turn is you're selecting one of these kind of hex animal tiles. You're flipping it over to the other side and placing it somewhere else on the board, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to complete these sets of animals or groups of animals, and they get multiplied by the watering holes on those tiles. But there is some cross-contamination, because some tiles have matching animals on, so some might have, say, an elephant and a giraffe on, and you want to try and create groups that string out or chain out to those other groups to make sure you're getting maximum efficiency there. Sometimes people are going to be choosing animals that you just are not prepared to move yet, because you haven't created that space, because this almost feels like a sliding puzzle where it gets congested, then it opens up a bit, so you need to plan a few turns ahead. But because you're at the mercy of the other players at times, you cannot always do what you want to do. My enjoyment of this one hasn't changed. I still think it's a great game. It's maintained in the collection. And I'm quite interested to see what the new Gara Park adds to the game. So if you know, or if you know anything about Gara Park, then please let me know and see if it's worth having both of them, or if you can, is it worth having both of them rather than just one or the other. So that is Savannah Park. I really enjoyed this one, and it's a great Kramer and Kiesling game. Just a couple more games here then. So we played a 3-player game of Corndot. I'm sure you're probably tired of hearing me talk about this one, but generally speaking, most gamers or most fans of Corndot don't recommend it at 3 players, because even though I do agree that it's better at the higher player counts, 4, 5, 6 players, it's absolutely excellent. I still actually do really like it at 3 players, because it is very punchy and very quick. So this is like a little area control game where you're trying to get 5 nations or 5 different regions of Italy under your control, or 3 connecting to each other. So there's kind of sudden death tension at times where, if you've got 2 regions next to each other and the next one comes up for battle, then that's a must-win situation or a must-stop win situation for the other players. I like the card play in this one. I think it's absolutely great the way you have to manage you manage your hand and to last you through several battles, because you only replenish them at certain points during the game. I think I managed to squeeze a victory out of this one, because I got that 3rd region up for battle, and I had one of these special key cards which will end the battle immediately, even though the other players might have had stronger cards left in their hand. So you can kind of really abruptly end it and catch players off guard, and that managed to work out in my favour. But there's some really cool little tactics here. There's more things that kind of unravel each time I play it. Like, for example, some of these battles were, or as they were undertaking, there was like a lot of bishop cards being played, which normally eliminates the strongest cards on the table. But because I was kind of sneaking under that high card value each time, I was always kind of avoiding getting hurt by that. And there's some really cool little tricks you can do, such as that here. So this is such a great game. One of the best games I've played over the last year. And, considering it's a game that's over 20 years old, it goes to show this one really does, stand the test of time. So that is Corndot. And the final game I'm talking about on this episode is Heroba. So Heroba was actually on my top 10 games of 2022. A lovely game that came out of nowhere for me. This is a hybrid kind of twist on the Sudoku puzzle mixed with an area control game. So all you're doing on your turn is you're deploying these little stones of your colour in these little gardens, trying to have the maximum coverage of them. So if you have a 6 to your opponent's 5, then you're going to score points equal to the size of that garden. But there are restrictions, and those restrictions become more squeezing as the game goes on, because you cannot have the same number token in the same row, column or garden as another player or yourself. So it does become quite restrictive, and you can plan things out quite accordingly, and try to, squeeze in little spots that other people can't do. And you can even use that to block people out. So if you know that you control this garden and your opponent only has, say, 3s left, and that would let you beat you, you can maybe put your 3s in that same row or column to stop them getting into that spot. This game takes so quick to play. It takes about 20 minutes to play, and it's a really rich experience for that time frame, and definitely one that's flown under the radar. So I think this one is going to kind of pick up, hopefully. And I'm sure that, it's got some longevity to it, because the rules are so simple and easy to digest. And it's a new twist on the area control genre, which, hasn't been, which has been done to death, basically. So it's always nice to see new, fresh approaches on it. So yeah, that is Heroba. Really recommend that one if you don't know much about it either. So nice little strong bunch of games here, you know, not too many, you know, only I think it's 5 games here that I've played, but they've all been good, maybe with Dice Minder being the exception, but there we go. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.